Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the St. John's Farmers Market Radio Almanac. This is a show about business and market culture in and around St. John's, Newfoundland. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew Ledrew, owner and operator at Engine Books, the province's fastest growing independent publisher of books.
Welcome to another fun-filled episode of the show. I say that every episode is good and fun-filled and lots of fun and lots of greatness and all this other stuff, but this one really is. We have got artist and crazy person Graham Blair on the line of Graham Blair's Woodcuts. He can be seen every week at the St. John's Farmers Market. A very wonderful artist who works in a bunch of different venues in this city. Thank you for joining us, Graham.
Great to be here.
It is great to be here. That's correct. Yes. Good. Tick for one. Yes, correct answer. Wonderful. So you've got a bunch of cool new projects out right now. I want to talk about this deck of cards that you've got going on. Last year you released a Newfoundland themed deck of cards, which is awesome, and now you're doing Newfoundland folklore. Is that correct? Tell me about this.
Yeah, that's right. So the first deck kind of centered around Livier era external activities, like specifically fishing, hunting, sealing, and sheep shearing, with each suit organized with the king and the queen, and then the jack being the animal. So the king and the queen engaged in different aspects of that activity. So I'd always thought, oh, well, a great companion deck to that would be something that deals with the interior life of these same people. Hence the folklore edition. And as you know, a lot of my work deals with folkloric themes, like my series of North Atlantic themed tarot cards, for example. So I thought, that made a lot of sense. So what I've done is I've made it so kind of mirroring that idea of organizing each suit around a different theme within the folklore. One of them deals with folklore of the sea. One of them deals with folklore of the home. So it's the jack tales, which would be told in the home. One is folklore of the woods. So it's all themed on fairies and fairy lore. And the final one is folklore of the night. So less of a place, but more of an idea. And so it's got a ghost as a king, and then the old hag as the queen, with an owl as the jack in that case.
Nice. You've used some old hag imagery in your work before. One of your famous prints is like an EC Comics homage of the old hag attacking a young man while he's asleep with some body parts visible and stuff like that. That's sometimes covered with stickers. What's up with all the old hag imagery? Were you visited by the old hag at some point? Or you seem obsessed?
The old hag, the faked comic book cover was actually something I did for an exhibition that was at the Craft Council Gallery. Dale Jarvis was brought on as sort of writing the text and working with the artists that were invited to participate in the show. So it was something I'd wanted to do because I thought, well, I had done work for Dale Jarvis in the past. He's the provincial folklorist, but he also does the Haunted Hike and is also a heritage officer for the province. So I've done work for various projects with him, and also the Storytelling Festival in its early days. He was sort of behind that. So I thought, well, I'll kind of bring some of those things together, because I know he likes comics, and I had done a website for his Haunted Hike that kind of had the feel of a graphic novel.
Nice.
That, specifically Hellboy, kind of the colors. So I thought, okay, well, the old hag would be perfect to put into a faked Tales from the Crypt style comic book cover. So that's where that had come from. So when I was doing the playing cards, I thought, the old hag was the perfect queen of the night in that case.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, I like it. That's very interesting. I will never understand how you come up with all this stuff. The folklore stuff, the cards that I've seen online, the Kickstarter's on the go right now. Depending on when this airs, it might be on the go or it might be over. But like that, it's so cool. Like the images that I've seen you sometimes at the market when you're on your iPad there, like on your tablet, working on the images and stuff like that. It it's marvelous, really. What drives you to do that stuff?
I think that because I chose woodcut printmaking as my primary art,
Yep.
I spend a lot of time doing very repetitive activities.
Mm.
So I have a lot of time to kind of mull ideas around in my head. And so go down a lot of rabbit holes, basically. So I think, I mean, that's kind of the cauldron out of which these kind of things come. But I've also always had a very interest in folklore. So even so my university degrees, I have an undergraduate and graduate degree in cultural anthropology and museum studies from UBC. But what I studied, a lot of what I studied was sort of the intersection of oral tradition and art. So sometimes in relation to Japanese works, because there's a lot of folklore that's incorporated into old woodcut prints, but also in First Nations in BC. You see totem poles, that kind of thing. But these are figures from stories and legends and family lineages. So that's something that's always sort of been around me. So I don't know. It's sort of, especially in the Newfoundland context, I think there's this fun idea of fake lore within folklore, and this, making something look old that isn't, or giving something, that kind of history. But it's not directly fake lore what I do, but in the sense of just bringing that history into my contemporary work, it gives it kind of a depth, and also while also kind of reinventing or re-expressing folklore for modern audiences. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's really good, and all the art. It I know this is just what artists do, but like they're all in the same style that you do, and it brings this kind of unity to things that weren't really unified to me. Like to me, if you asked me to draw a picture of a kraken and a picture of an old hag and a picture of this and a picture of that, they'd all be very different styles. You know what I mean? They would all be drawn by piece, there'd be some unity, but like it reminds you that this is all unified in one place with the unity of the artwork. Yeah.
And the deck of cards actually is a challenge, because I'll have to like sort of, I'll draw something and then I'll sit back and I'll be like, okay, do these all look like they work within the same universe? Because I can draw in very different styles, so it's so that actually is a bit of a challenge to make sure, because it takes so many hours. Like it takes like probably about 400 hours of work to do the design work, coloring and all that stuff. So by the time you finish it, you're kind of at a different place than when you started it. So it's sort of going back and making sure everything does work with itself. That's also why I think the idea of doing a graphic novel would really be terrifying in a way, because it takes so long that from when you start to when you finish, I would just feel like my style might evolve in that process or change or something.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. 400 hours. I cannot get over that. That's a shocking amount of time. That answers one of my questions. Is like, why isn't there art on all of the card, only on the face cards? And it's like, that's why.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, part of it too is I also I wanted to work within the conventions of playing cards, where it would only be the face cards that have elaborate artwork, and then you have the number cards. Because I have had decks that were just sort of, like cheap ones, like Marvel, like a cheap Marvel deck. And they put a comic on every single card. But when you're playing, it's actually kind of confusing, because everything looks like it's a face card if you're used to only the face cards having images.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in that case, it was a very lazy approach to the cards. But at the same time, that said, all the number cards are my own design. I even like hand draw the pips so that they, are slightly different from one another, and they have backgrounds that match the other cards. I've also done something where I've incorporated a style of 7 cards that so on modern decks you get they do the 7s, so basically it mirrors an 8 card. So on modern decks, the 7 cards are they mirror the 8 cards. So basically with an 8 card you have a row of 3 symbols and then 2 symbols and then 3 symbols. So the 7, they just omit one of the center ones. So it's the only non-symmetrical card. So what I did was I actually made a 7 design that's symmetrical. So whichever way you turn it, it looks a bit different, but it's just sort of a nice little quirk that I can incorporate by designing my own number cards as well.
Yeah, I like it. That's cool. That's super cool. All right. You've also got, at the time that this airs, I suspect we'll have announced, you have a book coming out from a local publisher, from Engine Books, that I am sometimes affiliated with.
Yes.
You've got a version of Frankenstein, Graham Blair Editions Frankenstein, which takes the original text from the late great Mary Shelley and mirrors it with your art, kind of the more woodcut style of your art, with I think there's a Newfoundland twist to a lot of the pieces that you're doing in it. Tell us about this. How did this, pretend I don't know how this happened. How did this happen?
Well, it was interesting because I have always liked illustrated versions of books. Like on my shelf, I have a version of Wind in the Willows that isn't the original illustrations. It's someone that did new ones for it. I have a really nice Alice in Wonderland. I also have a lot of the Arthur Rackham illustrated versions of Grimm's fairy tales and that kind of thing. And an illustrated Bible that was done by a woodcut artist. So I've liked that concept. And then this guy named Matthew came up to me and basically proposed the same idea. What if we took a public domain book and you did illustrations for it? So I thought that, when we talked about, some of the titles, so there were a couple being thrown around and I was like, oh yeah, Frankenstein, that would be a really cool one to do. Especially because I have this tie-in with kind of a bit of horror stuff through the folklore and through the old hag. So basically what we're going to do is have a book that has a number of full-page illustrations that don't necessarily place Frankenstein in Newfoundland, but it's all going to have like a Newfoundland kind of feel to the landscapes, that kind of thing that Frankenstein is in, because obviously we're not rewriting the text of the book to make it Newfoundland. So, but it's going to have elements of that, but it's going to be all black and white illustrations, but I'm really excited about it.
It's gonna lots of fun. I think I'm really interested in seeing some of the art that's been coming out of it. I think it's going to be a fun collab that I hope to continue with other works in the future. For sure. Awesome blossom. Great, good stuff. I've got a boatload of questions here, just ridiculous questions that I need to ask you. All right. Graham Blair, if you were stuck on a desert island forever for the rest of time, what 3 books or movies would you want with you?
Oh my God, that's hard. That's a really hard one. Well, I can tell you that one of my favorite movies of all time is Amadeus.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And a lot of people haven't seen that now, but when it came out, it was a really big deal because it was like, it's not a biopic.
No.
It takes, rumors essentially about Salieri and Mozart, and someone wrote a play. So it was actually a stage play. So it's, fanciful as far as the speculation in it. But I've always loved that movie since I was a little kid. So that would be one of them.
Okay.
I'm really not sure with the other ones. I've actually had a shift in a lot of the stuff I've watched because of COVID. Honestly, I've seen so much television that I think that it's changed actually quite a bit.
So that's wonderful. Did you manage to figure out 2 other movies or books?
I didn't.
All right,
I
no
did
worries.
not.
No worries. Graham Blair, if you were a jam, what kind of jam would you be?
I'd be marmalade.
Marmalade. Why You're the second artist to say marmalade. Why marmalade?
Well, I've always liked marmalade because it's I like the bitterness and the sweetness.
Yep.
And you don't get a lot of things. It's not tart. It's actually like real bitterness. And I think I've always liked marmalade because it is a unique combination.
Yeah. Okay. That makes
And
sense.
it's not that I'm bitter or anything.
But like marmalade, the existence of marmalade, it's a slippery slope, because then you've got bacon jam, and I'm like, what's this? Can we just make jam out of everything? Anything squished up is now a jam, apparently. Like, why not just make human jam?
But marmalade is a very traditional jam in the UK.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like especially in Scotland, it's like a big deal, and I think it's because oranges were a very rare thing, and
so you preserve it.
Yeah, so you're sort of preserving it, but also proper marmalade. There was actually somebody in town who used to make it at the market, and it was her grandmother's recipe or something like that. But proper marmalade, it actually has the peels in it.
Yes.
It's not just like jellied orange juice, which a lot of cheap marmalades are. So like a true marmalade is actually, kind of almost a combination of a jam and candied fruit in a weird way. It's got that element to it. So it is kind of, it's I guess technically a jam, but it is kind of its own thing at the same time.
I do like the idea of jellied orange juice. Just keep the pulp in as much as possible, and now it's a different product. Graham Blair, do you read reviews of your business? And if so, how do you deal with like good ones or bad ones?
I don't read reviews.
Smart
unless it's
vanity.
like, and it's sort of, I have combined type ADHD, and a big part of that is, rejection sensitivity, dysphoria. So comments can be really crushing in a way that isn't necessarily the same for other people. So I do not have a thick skin. So I don't really read reviews. Now that said, I do read them when they're on something like Etsy, because they tend to be more like feedback, like, if there's a problem with shipping or packing or something like that, that's a bit different. But, occasionally, like, especially when you have a Kickstarter campaign or something like that, you get some, oddball making some strange comments on things that, are maybe not nice to read. So I try to avoid them. Fortunately, I will say that I have not had, I've had generally positive feedback, which is great, on everything I've done. So I am happy about that.
Yeah. It's hard to be negative about a lot of the stuff. It's wonderful art.
Yeah, and I think you have to be a real ass to try and take down or criticize somebody who's a craftsperson doing their stuff. You know what I mean?
I don't know why some people can't just scroll past something they don't like. I feel this every once in a while on Facebook or on, like I said, like on Kickstarter or something like that. Why can't you see something you don't like and go, oh, that's not for me, and just keep going? Why do you have to be like, this isn't for me, and ergo you shouldn't do it? I'll let you know in the comments.
Yeah. And then on the other side, if you do like something, comment positively on it. Because that always feels, it'll make the person feel good, because they probably get a disproportionate number, or I know a lot of people get a disproportionate number of negative responses because negative people like to spread it, you know.
It is also horrible because it like I there's a part of me that likes to over compliment for fun, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
there's another part of me, you've experienced that. There's another part of me that honestly likes to over criticize for fun, like in a way that's very clear, like at least when I'm doing it in person, I hope tongue in cheek, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
oh, that Graham Blair, he invented syphilis. Did you know that? You know what I mean? Or like something outlandish. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I find that in the age of comments on the internet, I can't do that anymore because there's nothing so outlandish that no one would actually criticize that.
yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like there's nothing
yeah,
I can say that's obviously tongue in cheek, not real anymore, because someone will have absolutely put that in the comments on YouTube.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
people have just, it just seems like the comments have gotten meaner on a lot of things.
Yep.
Not myself, but in general. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Absolutely. Graham Blair, when you do a shift at the St. John's Farmers Market or a market, whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, are you energized or are you exhausted by the experience of peopling and working there all day?
I think I'm pretty tired by the end of the day because I talk a lot. So, I've always been, unless it's a slower month, but, when I'm kind of in the groove and it's around Christmas time, let's say, or
Mm-hmm.
during the summertime with a lot of tourists, um, I talk to people. So, and I actively sell my work, that kind of thing. So usually by the end of the day, I'm pretty tired.
That makes sense. That makes sense. A lot of exhaustion on that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Often my
Yeah.
voice gets tired in these COVID times. Like I
I
swear,
know.
every Monday I go home going like, "Oh my God, what if I have it?" And I'm like, "No, you were just talking all day yesterday." Like,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I find that with a mask on, I have to project more.
yep.
Like I have to talk louder, right? So I actually find that my abs hurt from trying to project more,
Okay,
which
that's
I'd
a different
never,
kind of ab workout.
yeah, which I'd never had before. But I remember after the Christmas craft fair, which is like 4 days or whatever it is. By the end of that, I was just like, oh, my stomach hurts from talking, I think. And I think it was just an extra effort that you need with a mask.
Yeah, that is what I was born for because I always enunciate way too much, or as our friend Kim says, enunciate.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I always enunciate far too much. So, like I'm a loud individual, so by nature, and I don't try it, but I was made for the mask. People are like, "Oh, you're so good at this." Like, wait until we don't have to wear them. You won't think you think I'll turn it back down, but I won't. Like, this is just who I am.
Yeah.
Graham Blair, is there any product or print you've stopped featuring at the table, and if so, why?
I mean, I do take things out of rotation as I have new things, so I only have so much room
Yep.
for things. Is there when I stopped though? Like, I don't think there was anything that I stopped having because it didn't sell or um, one of the weird things about prints is they do go through cycles too. So, for example, um, I have a print of a fox that's sold really, really well over the years.
Yep.
But what's interesting is that the first year that I had it, it did not sell very well, and nobody seemed to want a fox.
Okay.
And then the next year, everybody was buying the fox, so I didn't have enough. And this one, I used to go to the One of a Kind show in Toronto, so there'd be thousands of people coming through that show. And so the next year, I decided, oh, I'm going to print more. Or the next time I went to that show, and that's when the song "What Does the Fox Say" came out.
Yep.
So nobody bought it because they were so annoyed by the song.
Okay.
So there are a lot of ups and downs with the sales. So I mean, the old hag is a good example because it's quite graphic. It's the hag has breasts and a penis,
Yep.
And I thought, I don't know if this is going to sell very well.
Yep.
And I had done it initially for that exhibition, so it wasn't. They gave me an honorarium, so it wasn't a huge deal whether they sold or not. So that was when I did debate about whether I was going to have it on my table, but then it ended up selling really well. So
Yep.
yeah, so you can never predict with that.
No, you absolutely can't.
So
the
I guess
Hag one.
my answer is sometimes I'll put something away for a bit and then bring it out again, and then sometimes everything has changed by that point. So
That makes sense. I like that. The Hag picture, I always have this weird, I love it as a piece of art. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I that's one of yours I wouldn't get, because I'm like, where the hell would I put that in my home? And I'm always wondering about this with people who pick it up. I'm like, where are you putting this? I'm not trying to be like Judgy McJudge or some here, but like I have this like theory that there's a certain type of like if I was going to get that, it would go in a frame and there would be a spot on the wall where it hung only when my mother-in-law was coming around. Like I'd be
Yes.
like, okay, this picture of the family gets taken down and we put up the Hag thing just so that she knows what's up. Just to be like this is a conversation stopper. Like just
Yeah.
we're gonna get Nana to leave ASAP.
Now I must admit, I'm pretty sure a few people have bought it, especially the color version, without realizing.
Yeah.
But I'd also say probably at the same time that um, to a lot of people, it's a really terrifying image anyway, like with the penis or without the penis.
Yep.
So I guess that maybe makes a difference where, if someone's going to hang that on their wall, like something scary like that, maybe it doesn't really matter even once you've gone there,
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason why I put that in, this was a weird thing, because the reason why I put this in was a lot of horror comics had these really weird sexual aspects to them as well.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And I remember as a kid buying it was like at a comic book shop where you can't take things out of the wrappers, right? So it was a horror comic. I don't remember what the actual title was, but I couldn't look at it, so I just bought it. And I was probably about 12. And then when I took it home, it was like weird, like sex stuff.
Yeah,
was part of some of the stories. And I remember my mom finding it and just being like, "Oh my god, this is sick! You have to return this."
Yeah.
But that was part of why I put it in, because there was always that kind of strange element for me in the horror, and I mean, and obviously horror as a genre, like films. It's the one place where you would see nudity, especially back in the day when there wasn't a lot of nudity in films, horror films. You could pretty well guarantee that there was going to be nudity of some sort.
I just had an interesting idea for a Graham Blair edition. If it's public domain, you remember the Frederick Wortham book, Seduction of the Innocent?
I don't.
Okay, that was a book that came out in the 30s. That was a book by a very bad child psychologist. And he was basically the one that got all the comics canceled, because he said that comics turn your children homosexual and they rotted your brain,
right.
and they were resulting in all the delinquency of the world and stuff like that. Do an illustrated edition of that where all your illustrations are comics actually doing this to people, like illustrating comics turning your children into criminals. What does that process look like visually?
Yeah, that might be hard to get by contemporary censors.
Yeah.
It is funny though, with the censorship of comics. Yeah, that whole history I find really fascinating.
Yeah, it's strange for sure.
It's like horror comics were like the video games of the past, or the heavy metal music in the 80s where everybody was saying, your kid's going to be a Satanist and be part of a cult and all
that. There is always someone screaming, "Won't somebody please think of the children?" with something.
Yeah.
And it's like,
All right. Well, thank you for coming on again. For all of you listening, we'll be here the same time next week to talk more about business culture in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, Be sure to drop by and visit our guests and all the other vendors at the St. John's Farmers Market this week.